to the Wine Nirvana podcast. Wine reviews for the average wine drinker. No pretense, no snobbery, no numerical ratings. And here's our host, Stephen Hawk.
Thank you, Robin. Yes, it is I, Stephen Hawk, your wine guru. Hey, and thank you for joining me on your exploration of wine knowledge. Today's topic is wine adjacent, and that is Brandy and its subgenres Cognac and Armagnac. First definition, Brandy is simply a spirit that has been distilled from grape wine. Now, you can use other fruits. For instance, if you distill apple juice, you get Calvados. If you distill plum juice, you get Slivovitz. If you distill cherry juice, you get Kirsch. But in general, Brandy is made by distilling wine, and it is usually aged in wood. Although there are unaged brandies, and that includes Pisco from Peru, Grappa from Italy, and Marc from France. And in fact, there is a French company called Syrah, and they sell a product called Syrah Vodka, although it is really an unaged brandy because it is made from grapes. But we are going to concentrate on the wood-aged product. Brandy can come in an amazing price range. My local liquor store chain offers Christian Brothers a bottle for $12, or you can get the Hein 250th anniversary Cognac for $17,000. But it does come in a nice hand-blown crystal decanter, so you can eBay that and offset some of your purchase price. There is evidence of distillation as early as the 8th century, but the first documented grape distillation was in the 13th century, when wine was distilled and unaged, and it was used for the fortification of other wines, which is to say to boost the alcohol content. This was often done to enhance storage or shipment during sea voyages. In 1299, Arnaud de Villanueva, who was the personal physician of Pope Clement V, prescribed brandy as medicine and called it the water of life, which in Latin is aqua vitae, or in French, eau de vie, and the French often still refer to brandies as eau de vies even now. The name itself comes from the Dutch, the Dutch word brandewijn. This was coined in the mid-1500s and simply means burned wine. Doesn't sound too appealing, does it? Especially considering what brandy can actually become. A brandy is made. It's almost always made by distilling white wine, and from grapes that have a high acidity, a low sugar content, and a specific flavor profile. And these are usually not the kind of grapes that you would use if you were going to make a table wine. By far, the most common is Uni Blanc, also known as Trebbiano in Italy, Fol Blanc, and to a much lesser extent, Colombard. Now, brandy can undergo either a single distillation or a double distillation. And either way, there are three parts to any distillation. First come the heads. These are the more volatile compounds that come off the still before the main body of the ethanol, also known as the heart. And then, of course, the heart is distilled. And finally, the tails, and these are the less volatile compounds. Now, in single distillation, all three of these components are used, and this can be a more demanding process because the heads and the tails are more likely to contain undesirable flavors or unwanted components. And then in a double distillation, the body also the heart only is used. So after the first distillation, the heads and tails are disposed of, and then the heart is distilled a second time. Following the distillation comes the wood aging for color and flavor development. And during the aging process, which in French is known as élevage, or to breed, the brandy will be cut with water to get it down to what is usually about a 40% alcohol. Now, this can be done at the end of the aging process. The more refined way to do it is water is gradually added over the aging period, and this enables the water to combine much better chemically with the alcohol. In all brandies, the addition of caramel color is permitted under regulated limits, but because of this, a brandy's color is never a guide to its potential quality. So, brandies are made around the world. The United States, of course, Spain and Germany are also high-profile producers, but perhaps the most famous brandy of all is Cognac. And Cognac, like Champagne, is a place in France. It is located in central western France, about 45 miles east of the Atlantic. In the 16th century, Dutch traders were very actively working in the area of coastal France. One of their most important trading products was salt from the port of La Rochelle on the Atlantic. And the Charente River flows through Cognac to La Rochelle. And so because of this convenient shipment method, French producers sent their local wine to La Rochelle, where it was distilled into brandy and then shipped primarily to the Netherlands and England, creating an early and consistent market for brandy. In 1651, the the good townspeople of Cognac defeated the foes of Louis II. He was a prince and a general in Louis XIV's army. Out of gratitude, the king exempted Cognac from his taxes and duties on wines and distilled wines. And this economic leg up immediately established Cognac as a regional commercial center and further established their dominance in the production of Cognac. And by the early 18th century, the industry was quite well established, with houses such as Martel, Hennessy, and Rémy Martin doing a booming business. Cognac is a double distilled product, and in fact, the same stills used for Scotch malt whiskey are used for Cognac. And Cognac is aged in Limousin oak, which is taken from the local forests, a legendary high-quality oak for aging purposes. And because the producers in Cognac mastered this technique, the importance of wood aging was established, creating a smoother, more refined, more flavorful product. The Cognac producers began bottling in the 18th century, and then, as now, much of what is made for export. Cognac producers did endure a downturn in the in the 19th century. In the United States, which had become a large market, people started turning to whiskey and rum and abandoning brandy. And then in 1872, the scourge of phylloxera arrived. Phylloxera is a tiny mite that attacks the roots of grapevines and will totally decimate them. Coupled with that, new taxes were finally imposed. And also by this time, world competition had increased due to the popularity of cognac, and many of these other world producers called their product cognac. And just as the champagne producers over the last about 40 years have fought to establish their product as region specific, the cognac producers have done so as well. But things were not all doom and gloom, and by the early 20th century, replanting the rootstocks had been restored, and cognac was very much on the road to recovery. Now, here's another thing about cognac: they are almost always blends. You'll never see a vintage on any but the very, very rarest cognacs. Now, cognacs are labeled with a letter classification. One is VS, which is very superior, and under VS, the youngest brandy in the blend can be no less than 2.5 years old. VSOP is very superior old pale. There, the youngest must be 4.5 years old. There is the little scene VVSOP, very, very superior old pale. And then there are 3 classifications where the youngest component of the blend has to be at least 6 years old. And this is XO for extra old, extra, and reserve. Outside of France, these classifications have no meaning whatsoever. So you will see these kinds of letter demarcations on brandies around the world, and they do not necessarily, they just don't have any legal meaning, basically. There's another criteria called fine champagne. This means that 60% of the grapes come from the Grand Champagne region, and which is famous for its chalky soil. And there's also Grand Fine Champagne, and that one is from 100% from Grand Champagne grapes. Armagnac is about 80 miles due south of Cognac and is right next to Bordeaux. But because of the layout of the French coast, Armagnac is entirely landlocked, and over the centuries had much less opportunity for their product to become as well known as cognac. And in fact, Armagnac is even older than cognac. The first recorded barreling of Armagnac was in 1310. Unlike cognac, Armagnac undergoes a single distillation, and this leads to a rather different flavor profile. It's fruitier, it's more floral, it's earthier. Some say it has less finesse. The barrels, the wood for the barrels in Armagnac comes from the Gascon forest of black oak trees. Armagnac is also historically and to this day much more artisanal, and for much of its history, distillers would mount their stills on carts, and they would go from farm to farm and distill a barrel for each family. And to this day, by and large, the production remains quite small. And another distinction of Armagnac is it is not blended. So there you have it. Brandy, cognac, and Armagnac, all the same, all different. Now, here's a little bit about glassware. Almost everyone is familiar with the so-called brandy snifter, that big round balloon thing. And there is also a tulip-shaped cognac glass. And there are pictures of these glasses over at one of the Wine Nirvana blog posts if you want to take a peek at those. Although the balloon or the balloon snifter is much more common, connoisseurs and professionals prefer the tulip-shaped glass because they say that the big snifter allows too much of the brandy's aroma to be released. And finally, here's a little anomaly that I have noted over the years. There is very little overlap, I have found, between whiskey drinkers and brandy drinkers. For instance, I can, and often do, have brandy almost every night of the week, and I will have whiskey maybe once or twice a month. And then whiskey drinkers are the opposite. They drink whiskey regularly and very occasionally or never drink a brandy, even though these are both wood-aged distilled spirits. And I've asked whiskey drinkers about, well, why do you not like brandy? And the usual answer is, oh, it's too sweet. But as anyone who's had a glass of bourbon can tell you, brandy has no corner on the sweetness market. So one of those personal taste things, I find it interesting and inexplicable. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I will leave you with a quote from W.C. Fields, perhaps the greatest philosopher of the 20th century, without the painful impression, by the way. I'm reminded of my safari in Africa. Somebody forgot the corkscrew, and for several days we had to live on nothing but food and water.
This has been Wine Nirvana. To learn more, visit us at www.winenirvana.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.